My beloved child. There is something happening right now, something you cannot see with your physical eyes, yet its impact is already beginning to ripple through your future. Someone you have not fully met, someone whose heart is mysteriously being guided toward yours, has just discovered a truth about you. And it is changing everything. Not because of what you own. Not because of what you look like. Not because of what others have said about you. No. They are beginning to sense who you really are beneath the masks, beneath the disappointments, beneath every season that tried to convince you that you were invisible. And what they are discovering is leaving them overwhelmed. For so long, you believed your story was hidden. You thought the silent battles no one applauded were forgotten. You thought the tears shed behind closed doors disappeared into the darkness. But heaven records what the world overlooks. Every moment you chose kindness when bitterness would have been easier. Every time you stood back up when no one expected you to continue. Every prayer whispered into the silence. Every act of faith performed without guarantees. None of it was wasted. And now, someone is beginning to see the evidence of those hidden victories. That realization is striking them more deeply than you understand. Because they expected many things. But they did not expect you. They did not expect a soul carrying this much depth. They did not expect a heart that survived storms without becoming hardened. They did not expect someone who could still love after disappointment. Yet here you are. And the closer they look, the more their certainty grows. That is why their thoughts keep returning to you. That is why your name echoes through moments when they least expect it. That is why even ordinary days suddenly feel different to them. Something within them recognizes something within you. A connection is forming before either of you fully understand its purpose. And that realization has started a chain reaction. But there is something even more surprising. What has captured their attention is not your strengths. At least not the strengths everyone notices. It is the qualities you rarely give yourself credit for. The compassion you think is ordinary. The wisdom you think is common. The resilience you think everyone possesses. The authenticity you almost apologize for. Those very things are becoming impossible for them to ignore. While others searched for perfection, they are becoming fascinated by something much rarer. Truth. Because deep down, people can sense when a person is genuine. They can feel the difference between performance and authenticity. And your future spouse is beginning to realize that your spirit carries something they have been searching for far longer than they admit. That realization has created a tension inside them. A beautiful tension. Part excitement. Part wonder. Part disbelief. Because the more they discover, the more one question keeps returning. Could this really be the person I've been waiting for? They try to dismiss it. They try to stay logical. They try to convince themselves they are imagining things. Yet every attempt only seems to deepen the feeling. The signs continue. The reminders continue. The unexpected moments continue. And with every passing day, another piece falls into place. But here is what you do not know. There is one specific discovery they have made about you. One realization so powerful that it has completely shifted the way they see their future. They have not told anyone. They have barely admitted it to themselves. Yet it is becoming impossible to ignore. Because once they understood this truth about you, nothing looked the same anymore. And what that truth is, what they are only now beginning to understand, is the very thing that will change the course of both your lives. But that revelation is only beginning to unfold. A strange thing happens when destiny begins to move. The signs rarely arrive like thunder. They arrive like whispers. A feeling that refuses to leave. A thought that appears at unexpected moments. A sense that something important is drawing closer, even when there is no visible evidence. And this is exactly where your future spouse finds themselves now. Because the truth they discovered about you was never written on the surface. It was hidden deeper. Buried beneath everything the world celebrates. Far beyond appearances. Far beyond accomplishments. Far beyond the temporary things that rise and fall with time. They discovered your heart. Not the version you show strangers. Not the version polished for approval. The real one. The heart that keeps believing when circumstances suggest otherwise. The heart that still chooses hope after seasons that could have easily turned it cynical. The heart that quietly carries others while pretending it needs nothing in return. And when they recognized that, something inside them shifted. Suddenly, relationships that once seemed appealing began to feel incomplete. Conversations that once held their attention started feeling shallow. The things they thought they wanted no longer looked the same. Because once someone catches a glimpse of something real, counterfeits lose their power. Yet this realization brought an unexpected challenge. The closer they feel drawn toward you, the more they become aware of their own fears. Not fears about you. Fears about themselves. Questions they rarely allow anyone to see. Am I ready? Can I become the person this connection deserves? Will I recognize the opportunity when it finally arrives? Will I be brave enough to embrace what heaven is placing before me? Those questions have begun echoing within them. And while you may not realize it, preparation is happening on both sides. Not just in their life. In yours as well. Because destiny is not simply about bringing two people together. It is about shaping them before the meeting ever occurs. There are lessons being completed. Old chapters quietly closing. Wounds gradually healing. Perspectives changing. Pieces moving into position. Even moments that seemed random were serving a purpose you could not yet see. Nothing has been accidental. Not the delays. Not the detours. Not the unanswered questions. Not even the seasons when you felt forgotten. Especially those seasons. For it was during those moments that something invaluable was being built within you. Strength. Discernment. Patience. Depth. The very qualities that now make your future spouse pause in amazement. And there is another reason they cannot stop thinking about you. One that grows stronger each day. Because they are beginning to realize that you possess something increasingly rare in this world. Peace. Not a perfect life. Not a life without challenges. Peace. The kind that survives uncertainty. The kind that remains standing when circumstances change. The kind that cannot be purchased, borrowed, or imitated. And whether you recognize it or not, that peace radiates outward. People feel it. They may not always understand it. But they feel it. Your future spouse certainly does. In fact, that inner peace has become one of the greatest mysteries drawing them closer. Because they have spent years searching for answers in places that promised fulfillment but delivered exhaustion. Yet when their attention turns toward you, something feels different. Something feels safe. Something feels like home. And that realization is becoming impossible to escape. Still, there is one detail they have not fully understood. One hidden piece of the story that has remained concealed until now. It concerns a quality within you that even you have underestimated. A gift. A presence. A purpose that reaches far beyond romance. The moment they finally understand this part of who you are, the intensity of everything they feel will multiply. Because they will realize they are not simply being drawn toward a person. They are being drawn toward a future they never imagined possible. And when that realization arrives, neither of you will be able to see your journey the same way again. Because the next revelation is not about who they are becoming. It is about who you have been all along. Without fully knowing it yourself. Without warning, a single realization can transform everything. Not because new truth is created, but because hidden truth is finally seen. And that is precisely what is beginning to happen. Your future spouse is approaching a discovery that reaches far beyond attraction, beyond compatibility, beyond the ordinary reasons people come together. They are beginning to understand something about you that has been present from the very beginning. Something that countless people overlooked. Something you yourself have often questioned. Your influence. Not the kind measured by followers, applause, or recognition. A deeper influence. The kind that changes people without demanding attention. The kind that leaves hearts lighter after a conversation. The kind that inspires courage simply through presence. The kind that carries healing into rooms without ever announcing its arrival. For years, you may have underestimated the effect you have on others. You may have assumed your words were ordinary. Your encouragement was small. Your kindness was expected. Your compassion was nothing special. But heaven sees differently. What feels natural to you often becomes unforgettable to someone else. What you dismiss as simple may be exactly what another person needed to keep moving forward. And now, your future spouse is beginning to connect those dots. The more they observe, the more they learn, the more they reflect, the more one undeniable truth emerges. You leave people better than you found them. That realization has stopped them in their tracks. Because in a world filled with noise, they have encountered someone whose greatest power is not what they take from others, but what they awaken within them. And that changes everything. Yet this discovery brings another layer of mystery. Because they are starting to notice patterns. Moments that once seemed insignificant now feel meaningful. Conversations that appeared ordinary now carry unexpected weight. Encounters they nearly dismissed now feel strangely important. It is as if pieces of a puzzle are quietly assembling themselves. Not randomly. Not accidentally. Purposefully. And with every piece that falls into place, a question grows louder inside them. How did our paths begin moving toward each other long before we knew it? Because the truth is, some connections are developing long before introductions occur. Some stories begin before names are exchanged. Some journeys intertwine long before either traveler recognizes the road ahead. And that realization has begun stirring something profound within them. A sense that your meeting will not feel like a beginning. It will feel like a recognition. As though two chapters written separately suddenly reveal they belong to the same book. Still, there is a reason this process has unfolded gradually. If every answer had arrived at once, neither of you would have fully appreciated its significance. Growth requires timing. Preparation requires patience. And understanding often arrives one layer at a time. That is why certain doors remained closed. That is why certain relationships could not continue. That is why certain opportunities disappeared despite your efforts. At the time, those moments felt confusing. Some felt painful. Some felt unfair. But now a larger picture is beginning to emerge. Every ending was creating space. Every delay was protecting alignment. Every detour was guiding both of you toward the exact place where your paths could eventually converge. And here is the remarkable part. Your future spouse is no longer resisting this possibility. The doubts that once dominated their thinking are losing strength. The uncertainty that once clouded their vision is beginning to clear. Something within them knows. Not everything. Not yet. But enough to recognize that this connection carries unusual significance. Enough to understand that what they are feeling is deeper than coincidence. Enough to realize that the future they once imagined is quietly being rewritten. However, one final barrier remains. One hidden obstacle that neither of you fully sees. A barrier not created by distance. Not created by timing. Not created by circumstances. A barrier created by a belief. A belief you have carried for far longer than you realize. And until that belief is exposed, the most powerful revelation of all cannot fully arrive. Because what heaven is preparing to show you next is not merely how your future spouse sees you. It is how you have been seeing yourself all wrong. And when that truth finally comes into the light, everything changes. There are moments in life when the greatest obstacle is not the mountain in front of you. It is the mirror. Not because the reflection is weak. Not because the reflection is broken. But because the reflection has believed a story that was never completely true. And this is where the next revelation begins. For years, you have carried assumptions about yourself that felt undeniable. Perhaps they were born from disappointment. Perhaps they were formed during seasons when doors refused to open. Perhaps they were reinforced by voices that spoke from their own wounds rather than from truth. Whatever their origin, they left a mark. A quiet narrative. A hidden script running beneath your thoughts. One that whispered, "Maybe I am not enough. Not talented enough. Not important enough. Not chosen enough. Not worthy enough." And though you continued moving forward, part of you still carried those questions. Part of you still wondered whether the things placed within your heart were truly meant for you. But something extraordinary is happening. Because while you have been wrestling with those doubts, your future spouse has been discovering evidence that points in the opposite direction. The qualities you question are the very qualities they admire. The strengths you overlook are the strengths they notice. The beauty you fail to recognize is the beauty they cannot ignore. And every new realization is challenging their understanding of what they thought they were searching for. Because they expected perfection. What they found was authenticity. They expected someone impressive. What they found was someone impactful. They expected someone who stood above others. What they found was someone who lifted others. And that difference has affected them more deeply than they ever anticipated. Yet there is something even more astonishing. The closer they move toward understanding who you are, the more they begin to see the fingerprints of purpose throughout your journey. Events that once seemed disconnected now appear linked. Unexpected turns now appear intentional. Even setbacks reveal hidden value. It is as though an invisible thread has been weaving through your story all along. A thread neither of you fully noticed until now. And once you see it, you cannot unsee it. Because purpose leaves clues. Not always obvious clues. Not always immediate clues. But clues nonetheless. Moments that make sense only when viewed from a higher perspective. Moments that reveal meaning long after they occur. Moments that prove there was more happening behind the scenes than you ever imagined. That is why this season feels different. You may not be able to explain it. You may not have all the answers. You may still have questions waiting for resolution. Yet something within you senses movement. Something within you feels the atmosphere shifting. The chapter is changing. The story is advancing. The waiting is teaching its final lessons. And your future spouse feels it too. They may not know your entire story. They may not understand every detail. But they are beginning to recognize something undeniable. You carry a rare combination. Strength without arrogance. Wisdom without pride. Compassion without weakness. Faith without performance. And those qualities are creating a powerful impression upon their heart. Not because they are looking for someone flawless, but because they are discovering someone real. Someone whose character remains intact even after challenges. Someone whose light was not extinguished by difficult seasons. Someone who continued becoming despite every reason to stop. And now, the realization that once seemed distant is moving closer. Closer than either of you realize. The pieces are aligning. The preparation is deepening. The understanding is expanding. Yet before the next door opens, there is one final truth that must be revealed. A truth so personal that it may explain years of confusion. A truth that answers questions you never knew how to ask. A truth about why certain people left. Why certain opportunities disappeared. Why certain paths unexpectedly closed. Because what looked like rejection was often redirection. What looked like loss was often protection. What looked like delay was often preparation. And when that final piece clicks into place, you will understand why nothing unfolded the way you expected. Because it was unfolding the way it needed to. And the moment your future spouse fully realizes the role you were always meant to play in their life, the message hidden within every chapter of your journey will finally become clear. What they discover next will not simply change how they see you. It will reveal why your paths were destined to find each other in the first place. Have you ever noticed how certain answers only make sense after the journey is nearly complete? Not because the answer was hidden, but because you were still becoming the person capable of understanding it. This is one of those moments. The moment when scattered pieces begin forming a picture neither of you could have seen before. Because your future spouse is starting to realize something profound. You were never meant to enter their life merely to fill a role. You were never meant to be another chapter. Another experience. Another temporary connection passing through. No. The impact you carry reaches deeper than that. Far deeper. What they are beginning to recognize is that your presence awakened something within them that had been dormant for years. Dreams they abandoned. Hope they buried. Faith they stopped talking about. Possibilities they quietly convinced themselves would never happen. Around you, those things begin to breathe again. And that realization has shaken them in ways they never expected. Because most people influence behavior. Very few influence destiny. Yet every time they imagine a future that includes you, something expands. Something brightens. Something suddenly feels possible. And the more they reflect on it, the harder it becomes to ignore. This connection is not built on fantasy. It is built on alignment. A meeting of values. A meeting of purpose. A meeting of hearts that have traveled through different storms and somehow emerged carrying lessons that complement one another. That is why the pull feels different. It is not demanding. It is not chaotic. It is not driven by fear. It is steady. Quietly powerful. The kind of force that does not need to shout because it knows where it is going. And now, your future spouse is beginning to see something that once remained hidden from view. They are seeing the pattern. The pattern behind every disappointment that once seemed meaningless. The pattern behind every delay that once felt frustrating. The pattern behind every closed door that once felt unfair. Because had certain relationships succeeded, you might never have become who you are now. Had certain opportunities worked out, your path may have drifted somewhere entirely different. Had every prayer been answered immediately, the deeper purpose beneath those prayers might never have emerged. Suddenly, what looked random begins revealing design. What looked broken begins revealing wisdom. What looked unfinished begins revealing preparation. And as this understanding grows within them, another realization follows close behind. One that catches them completely off guard. They are no longer fascinated merely by who you are. They are becoming inspired by who they can become beside you. That thought changes everything. Because true connection does not shrink people. It expands them. It calls forth their courage. Their integrity. Their growth. Their highest potential. And when they imagine walking beside you, they see more than companionship. They see possibility. They see partnership. They see a future built on something stronger than circumstance. Yet there is still one final mystery waiting to unfold. One final veil waiting to lift. Because despite everything they have discovered, despite every realization that has stirred their heart, there remains a truth so beautiful, so unexpected, that neither of you has fully grasped it yet. It concerns timing. The very thing that once frustrated you. The very thing that tested your patience. The very thing that made you question whether certain promises would ever arrive. Soon, you will understand why the clock moved the way it did. Why certain seasons lasted longer than expected. Why some answers seemed delayed. Why some doors remained closed until now. Because timing was never working against you. It was quietly working for you. And when the final revelation arrives, when both of you finally see what has been unfolding behind the curtain all along, you will realize that the story was never about finding each other. It was about becoming ready to recognize each other. And what happens when that moment finally arrives? When preparation meets purpose. When recognition meets alignment. When two journeys finally intersect at exactly the right place and exactly the right time. Is a revelation so powerful that it changes the meaning of everything that came before. But that moment, that breathtaking moment, is closer than either of you think.